Life, Brother Chris Lainas. Chris went by many names and titles. California State President, Grand Worthy President, El Greco, Amigo, Cristobal, and part of the dynamic duo. We're here today not to mourn the passing of a friend or loved one, but to celebrate the fact that we had the privilege of knowing this man. To celebrate that our lives were touched by him in some way. Chris was not a perfect man, but who among us is? He lived his life to the fullest. He was honest and sincere in his beliefs. When there was something he felt strongly about, he was willing to take a stand and fight for it, even if he was in the minority. Chris's life primarily revolved around two areas: his beloved Lucy and the Fraternal Order of Eagles. Chris loved people, and he loved to have fun. There was always two things you could count on with Chris. He was never early, and he always stayed late. In his opinion, a proper bedtime was 2 in the morning, and time to rise was just before noon. Chris moved at one speed, his. No matter that he was running late, or that Lucy had told him for the 3rd time to hurry up, Chris just continued along, very methodical, at his own pace. Most of the time it didn't make any difference anyway. But Lucy believes in everything being planned and properly and on time. And as you might imagine, this led to many lively discussions. I truly believe that there was a Guinness Book of Records for who could pack the most suitcases and things in the trunk of a car. Chris would have been champion. In fact, he was so good at packing that Lucy always had him pack her clothes in her suitcases. Chris had many interests. From trains, one whole room of their home is full of model train tracks and train paraphernalia, as Lucy can attest to. Trains were his theme for many years, and when he was Grand Worthy President, we traveled from Sacramento to LA, where he borrowed a truck that had been converted to look like a railroad locomotive, and then trailered it back to Sacramento and on to Salt Lake City, where he proudly drove this train as engineer in the Grand Area Eagle Parade with California Eagles on the railroad car behind. His other great love was his boat, that he very seldom had time to use, but was always well maintained and usually resided in his garage while his truck sat outside. One of his last wishes was to be around to take that sucker for one more spin. He loved to run that boat. I believe the things that will always be remembered about Chris is his honesty and his integrity and his fairness to all he came in contact with throughout his walk of life. Farewell, my friend. You will be missed, but you will not be forgotten. We were each so fortunate to have known you. At this time, I would call on Gary Leach of the American Legion to take over the rest of the opening. Here, that was a fine opening by the American Legion, Yellow Post number 77. This time we are going to go into the Eagles Memorial Service, where we will pay a final tribute to our deceased member. Brother John Anzando is going to join me in this ceremony. Brother John.
Thank you, Brother John. Brothers and friends, we have assembled here today to pay the last sad tribute of love and respect which the Fraternal Order of Eagles renders to its dead. It is a time, honored custom in our fraternity, that in the busy turmoil of this life, we pause to note the departure of our brothers. Yet, it is not a final parting. The Fraternal Order of Eagles teaches that we shall meet again, and that the tender associations of life are broken only to be reunited. Whether we look into the living eyes of those we love, or gaze upon the blessed faces of our dead, love divine comforts us with the blessed assurance that this relation is eternal. Chris Lainas was both friend and brother. Knowing that he believed in the eternal principles of this order, we are comforted. He valued liberty, loved truth, was swayed by justice in his dealings with all men, and was gracious and brotherly in the observance of true equality. He believed in the existence of a supreme being. The Father was all, giver of every good and perfect gift. And in this belief he died in the hope of a blessed immortality beyond the grave. He bore the trials of life and fought his battles, till tired and weary of the struggle, he fell asleep. For him, eternal rest remains. No mortal has ever said enough of riches, honor, and wisdom when death ended his career. The eye is never satisfied with seeing. Endless are the desires of the heart. Man divides his new schemes on the graves of 1,000 point hopes. Discontent abides in a palace and in blood, rankling alike in the breast of prince and pauper. Death finally terminates the combat, and grief and joy, success and failure are all ended. Like a child falling asleep over his toys, man loosens his grasp on earthly possessions only when death overtakes him. The master and the servant, the rich and the poor, the strong and the feeble, the wise and the simple are all equal in death. The grave levels all distinctions and makes the whole world kin. The night is gone, and with the morn, those angels' faces smile, which he had loved long since and lost upon. The sleep in which he has entered we call death, but in the light of eternity there is no death. The stars go down to rise upon some fair shore, and bright in heaven's jewel crown they shine forevermore. Let us all rise and remain standing while the worthy chaplain offers a prayer.
Here at this function, this celebration of life for Chris Lainas, I said, well, I'm going to go to that and represent myself as well as the Grand Dairy. Chris was a good friend of mine, and we had several disagreements over the years and stuff over different things. Chris was the type of person that you always knew where you stood. If he had an issue with you, you can bet that he was going to come directly to you and tell you about it. And he did that to me several times. and I appreciated that of Chris. I mean, it was a breath of fresh air to have somebody come up and say, hey, I heard you said this, or I heard you did this, or I heard this was going on, and I didn't want to hear it from somebody else. I wanted to hear it from you, what's going on. And then we had, like I said, we had several conversations like that over the years. But the one thing that I got to say, and I went to Chris and I was able to tell him this years ago, back when he came down to Garden Grove and picked up that train for the float, that was when I first got to know Chris. I was president of Garden Grove at the time, and they came down there, and they were down there several times. John was with him, DeVere was with him, and that group of individuals came down there, and they impressed me so much that the reason that I'm here today as a Grand Dairy officer is because of Chris Lainas. And I was able to tell him that, and it's proud for me to be here today to represent the Grand Dairy and to be here on behalf of them and myself, and to tell you that, you know, Chris meant a lot to me. You know, like I said, we had a lot of disagreements, and we had some talks over the years. But Chris was a friend. He was an inspiration to me. And it's because of him that I'm standing here today, because I had no aspirations to even run for state office at the time that I met Chris. And he impressed me, and DeVere and John and those guys came down, and it was, you know, I owe this to them. I'm glad I'm here to represent you and to represent Chris. And I want to thank him for that. And you know, it's great to be here. And whether the Grand Area was asking me to be here or not, there was no way that I'd miss this. So just want to thank you all for, you know, for the love you've given Chris and Lucy, and you know, God bless all of you for being here.